Hi, and welcome to A Better You, your one-stop shop for everything self-insight, self-improvement, and self-care. I'm Emily, and today we're going to talk about redefining our language learning habits. This is quite personal to me at the moment, as I have actually had to redefine my language learning habits of late, due to a change in work, due to a change in what's expected of me from a home perspective, and just due to this crazy year. I've noticed that my language learning habits were just not working quite as well as they could be for me. And we took a holiday, or a staycation more to the point, up to Scotland. And the break really gave me time to reconsider what I wanted, where I was, and what would be useful from a language learning perspective. Essentially, the holiday kind of highlighted for me that I've been putting an awful lot of pressure on myself from a language learning perspective. And because of that, it was almost counterproductive because of the levels of pressure, I wasn't enjoying it as much. And so the language learning wasn't going in as effectively. To put this into context as to what I was actually doing, before the holiday, I was working 4 days a week for around 10 hours a day. I was reading 3 chapters of the Bible every day, and I was walking 16,000 steps a day. That's around 7 miles, plus learning 6 languages. And the 6 languages are Persian, Comanche, Turkish, French, German, and Dutch. Now, I do know them to varying degrees anyway, so it takes varying levels of effort for learning each language. But by the same token, it obviously does take effort for every language. So essentially for each language, I had 20 minutes of listening exercises for both Comanche and Turkish. I also listened to a 5-minute video for Persian, French, and German. I did the daily lesson on Monday for French, German, Dutch, and Persian. I did Link U for Dutch, French, German, and Turkish. I was keeping daily language notebooks, so vocabulary lists, referring back to notes I'd made previously on Comanche and Turkish, and I had a daily personal journal that I wrote in Turkish. Obviously, regardless of how much pressure this is putting on, these habits did bring me on in the languages, and they obviously brought improvements in the languages. But I did also notice that I was getting migraines and racing thoughts as I slept, where it's just not working. So something's got to give, basically. When I was reviewing the habits, I essentially looked at how much time the habit was taking and how effective the habit was. And that balance of them kind of gave me the direction as to which ones needed changing, which ones could stay as they were, and which ones probably had to go completely. For example, if something was taking an awful lot of time and having very little benefit, then obviously that one's first on the list to go. So my current goals from a language learning perspective, because obviously this is really important when you redefine your habits to make sure that they're still edging you towards your goal, are to know 40,000 words in Turkish by the next time I visit, which is likely to be summer next year. To speak Kurdish conversationally, again, around summertime next year. I'd like to have around 15,000 words in Dutch, German, and French by August next year. I'd like to be able to confidently read the Persian alphabet letters by March next year. And I'd like to be conversationally fluent in Persian by the end of next year. From a wider point of view, because obviously different habits are playing into these schedules, I would like to have finished reading the Bible by December 2022. And I would like to maintain my size, which is a 6 to 8 in the UK, and to maintain my waist measurement. Obviously, I do also have wider goals from a work perspective and things, but keeping this streamlined from the habit perspective, we'll just focus in on health and weight and languages. So the things when I was reviewing the time that the habits took that immediately jumped out at me that were taking the most time were the walking 7 miles a day, which obviously takes an awful lot of time, and the listening exercises. Whilst the walking is the only real habit that I do that achieves my weight goal, so it is quite a key one, I have started to test whether 6 miles would do the same job and whether it would keep me at that weight maintenance level. And so far that is working out, and it does give me an extra, probably an hour, which in the grand scheme of things is pretty useful to have. The Bible readings, because I was doing the 3 chapters a day, I was somewhat rushing through them. And so I've cut that down to 2, but with a more focused level of reading. And for French, German, and Persian, I've decided to cut out the listening exercises. So as much as this was only around 15 minutes, it's 15 minutes that could be better used. And it's not really helping my languages at that stage with those particular languages. And that's purely because I'm quite early in my journey with those languages. So the apps are way more useful. So if I do have spare time to spend on those languages, then I would prefer to use them on LingQ or on Mondly. Talking of the LingQs and the Mondlys, I am keeping them for all of the languages. They are really useful. I find myself coming on in my languages quite dramatically from these apps, so I'm definitely going to keep those in place. And I am going to keep the Turkish and Comanche listening exercises because I'm more progressed in those languages and the input is really useful at this stage. And for the notebooks, I'm going to keep them, but I'm not going to force myself to do it as a daily habit. So I will do it when it's useful and I'll make sure that I do writing exercises. But again, it just doesn't feel hugely helpful right now. So writing down lists of vocabulary, it's just not where I'm at with the Turkish and Comanche journey. I feel I've moved past that point in the journey at this stage. And so for now, I'm going to drop those habits. And again, I'll look down the line to see if they become useful again in the future. To ensure that this new structure works for me, I'm going to test it for 3 weeks and kind of just make sure that I'm still progressing with the languages and make sure that it's having the impact on my general well-being that I intend it to have. So it's giving me more time, it's giving me more freedom, and it takes a bit of that pressure off so I can really make sure I'm enjoying that language learning as it is a hobby for me. From a language learning perspective, I do think it's really key to check in with ourselves every now and again and just make sure that our habits are working for us still. And that's because you do learn the best when you're enjoying content. And if you're starting to put too much pressure on yourself or you haven't reviewed those habits regularly, then either the stage that you're at in the language might have changed and so a particular resource might not be as useful. Or if you're not enjoying it anymore, then the learning might not be as effective. From my perspective, I think the real key here is being really honest with yourself, making sure that you check in with yourself every 3 months and just double check to see if those habits are working. And again, just referring back to what your goals are and making sure that your habits are still progressing you towards your goals, as opposed to just keeping going and keeping going and keeping going and eventually getting to the time that you intended to reach a goal and having not achieved it because you've kind of just done a daily habit and forgot to check if it was working out for you. I'd love to learn more about what your language learning habits are, and potentially I could look to see if any of those would work in my routine. So please do comment down below and just share some of the tools and resources that you use as you're learning languages. And if you have enjoyed this video and if you have found it useful, please do like it and share it with anybody that you think might find it interesting. Please also do subscribe for more language learning content, plus content on self-improvement, self-discovery and self-care.